Hey guys, Firebat here. This is pretty cool. The patch notes for the latest upcoming 18.6.1 patch from Hearthstone include Duels balance updates. So not only are there Duels card changes, Duels treasures changes, Duels passive changes, Duels hero power changes, they've also reworked the balance so that the dialogue will be more impressed with your number of wins, which I found kind of funny. But jumping right into it here, the first change, Party Portal, is being nerfed a little bit. They felt the Party Portal had too much party. Amalgamate is getting a much needed buff. That card was almost never picked as a treasure by me. It's so bad, I thought I had to combo with other cards for some secret Easter egg-like effect, like the blade and the hilt of Quell Delar, but I wasn't able to put one together while trying different things. But now it will be costing 0 mana, so it's still bad. But I guess less bad. Alright, next up we have the Spyglass, which used to cost 2, now is going down to 1. You still probably almost never pick this one either, but you consider it. You know, if you have all bad options, maybe this is the least bad of the bad options, right? It goes from like a never pick to a, oh god, I guess I have to pick, right? The Canopic Jars here, this one was actually, I've taken this one before and been not too disappointed. So I guess that's why they're nerfing it. But I mean, it wasn't something that was crazy. I wasn't like, oh yes, I have a Canopic Jars, I'm gonna dominate. It was more like, I guess Canopic Jars, but evidently maybe this was stronger than I thought, because they thought it was strong enough that they're willing to nerf it. So kind of interesting there. I might take it more just for the fact that now it's been nerfed, so it's like, what was I missing beforehand? I guess it fits in some like token decks and stuff like that pretty well. Next up we have a Wish. Wish was one that I also have not really taken before. Mainly because 11 mana is pretty difficult to pull off when you have, you know, generally 10 mana. Unless you can combo it with some pretty specific treasures. Unless you already have the mana discount, you couldn't really take this. Now at 10, any deck can justify taking it, and it's just better with the mana count. So this one's gonna be super powerful, I think, because it's just a win condition in a can. You gotta have all early game in your deck, and then you gotta just plop this bad boy at the top. And it's pretty good for most of the run, because a lot of classes don't have too much hard removal / AoE. Like Mage has Flame Strike and Blizzard, it's the most popular class, and then Demon Hunter that has the Blade Dance, but that only hits 3 minions and this fills the entire board. And those I'd say are some of the more popular classes. Shaman also has damage-based AoE. What I'm kind of leaning at here is there's not a lot of warriors running around with brawls or warlocks running around with twisting nethers that are clearing your board right now. The Wish seems like a powerful choice in what the current meta looks like. Next up we have Pure Cold. Pure Cold was the 6 mana fireball. I've taken it a few times, honestly, and I've never really been too disappointed with it. In a burn heavy deck, it really just seems to carry its weight pretty well, and now it's going to be even cheaper. You're going to be able to get that burn out more effectively. You really can only use this in a burn deck, though. Unless your deck is trying to burn people out, you can't really benefit off of direct enemy hero damage because you can't target minions or anything. So I don't think this change is really going to change how often you're going to see this treasure be picked. Either it's good for your deck or it's not good for your deck. The mana cost wasn't the most relevant factor. Alright, the passive treasure changes. We have Crystal Gem. So Crystal Gem was something that was almost never picked. It was, a lot of streamers would say that it was the worst passive to get. It just didn't have too much practical value because it was just basically you start the game with a coin that you had to use on turn 1. So this is kind of a bummer. Now that's on the first 2 turns you have 1 extra mana crystal, so it's twice as good as before. And might be enough. 2 turns of extra mana does allow you to gain a little bit of tempo, being able to squeeze out that 3 drop a little bit earlier, or if you have the coin, the 4 drop a little bit earlier, might be decent enough to snowball you ahead on board. But I still probably rate it a lot lower than most of the other treasures. Alright, on to the class-specific treasures. The Summoning Ritual is moved from 4 mana to 5 mana. Summoning Ritual during the first 3 runs of Duels was absolutely terrifying to play against. It was very frustrating. If they were coined Summoning Ritual or played Summoning Ritual on 4 during the first 3 games of your Duels run, you're probably dead and there's nothing you can do about it, unless maybe you're a hunter and you can really race them down. So delaying that by 1 turn I think is very good. Players just needed more time to be able to interact with the minions. So hopefully there'll be less demon hunters just stomping you out in the first 3 games of your run and ruining the session for you. Next up is the Rogue Treasure Change. The Rogue Treasure Change is getting a buff, increased durability to the weapon. Now it's +2/+2 instead of +2/+1. The durability is by far the most important part. This is going to allow your deadly poison to be twice as effective. This is a huge buff to deadly weapons. Rogue is going to be able to really race down its opponent with the weapon during the first 3 runs of the game. Rogue was not one of the top classes with the starting deck, and might actually end up, just because of this change, being one of the top classes with the starting deck. This is just so much damage in 1 card. An extra complete swing of the weapon is ridiculous. So if you're able to get the deadly weapons early, you can really stack up weapon damage and go face, right? I don't know if it's enough yet to really push Rogue to be one of the 2 good classes, but it's definitely leans in the right direction. Rogue's going to be able to get away with maybe less early game stuff now in their starting deck, which is going to allow a little bit more freedom to explore some of the other avenues that Rogue has to offer. But even though it's a buff to the weapon card, I think it opens up other passages for Rogue, because now they need to invest less into the weapon in their starting deck, so they can invest more into other things and be a more well-rounded class, hopefully. So buffing weapons to buff other things, kind of weird, but I think it'll work. Next to the Rogue hero power, down to 1 mana? It's nuts, actually. All right, maybe Rogue's going to be a top class now. Rogue's really going to have an easy time in the early game now. 1 mana dagger? That's crazy. Okay. Rogue might be a top class now with these 2 changes, because I feel like you can get really greedy with the starting deck now after this. And then the Shaman has been changed as well. You used to be, if you're overloaded, you'd summon a regular totem and a special totem. Let's see what this is. Summon a random totem if you're overloaded, summon a non-basic totem instead. So it's only 1 totem now. Oh, this is so much worse for Shaman. Shaman's taking a big hit on this one. Shaman got away with main decking Bloodlust and main decking some pretty greedy inclusions, because they could just eventually overwhelm their opponent with totems. And literally every overload card was pretty much good, just because the hero power was so strong, and if you had activators for that hero power, you generate so much additional value because of the threats of the totem. All of a sudden, now if you're not getting the basic totem, rolling Flame Tongue totem off this kind of blows, because you're not going to have those little minions on the board to trade in with, because there's no random extra totem there. So Flame Tongue gets way worse. Trick Totem's less likely to buff your things because you have less things. Mana Tide's less likely to be protected by Taunt Totem because you're not getting the free totems. The Shaman taking a big hit, I'd say. It was one of the top classes, and now it's definitely not after this change. Next up, we have the Warlock hero power, which is going to be staying the same effect-wise, but the cost is going to be reduced by 1 mana. And 1 mana changes are pretty big, allowing you to more flexibly utilize your discard synergies and do things with Warlock. It really needed a buff. Warlock was one of the weaker classes, and now is going to be hopefully seeing more play, and we can experiment with it. Honestly, I haven't played too much Warlock. It has been memed on so much by the community that I just kind of stayed away from it for the most part. But now with this change, I'm excited to give it a go. I've wanted to give it a go, because I feel like some of the Warlock class cards could do really well in the format, because a lot of people aren't really respecting them, the Twisting Nethers and those kind of things. So I'm interested to give it a run. Next up, we have the Warrior hero power, which is also staying the same, but reducing down to 1 mana. With all these 1 mana hero powers, we're probably going to see a lot of Mana Theater Panthera, so that'll be kind of cool. But the Warrior hero power I already felt was pretty good. You can combo it with Wax Rager and things like that too now, for super efficient armor gain. Like, you could do it before, but 2 mana gain 2 armor, not that exciting. 1 mana gain 2 armor, very exciting. So I think Warrior's got a fair shot of being quite competitive. So yeah, really interested in these hero power changes. These hero power changes are really going to spice things up. I'm super excited to see about that. We are moving into the battlegrounds section. Nefarian has been removed from the battlegrounds hero pool. Nefarian's been around for a really long time. I think maybe people are getting kind of bored of it. With the tribes cycling in and out and mechs not always being present, there's a lot less divine shields for him to farm with his hero power. He's been solidly placed at tier 4 for a while. It makes sense to take him away, try and rework him, bring him back later. So I understand this change, and I'm on board with it. Queen Togwaggle is receiving a buff. Now instead of just 2 attack on the minion types, it's going to be 2 attack and 1 health. This is a hero that has been in a pretty bad spot for quite a long time. I don't know if Queen Togwaggle was ever not tier 4. So getting a little bit of a boost there is good, and I always loved Togwaggle because it's one of the heroes where you get to build the Super Hydra, and Menagerie is always just kind of fun. So I'm excited to see that getting a little bit of a rework. I don't think it's going to lead to too much more play. Maybe, though. It is a lot of stats on the hero power if you are able to set it up. It's just that Menagerie as a type overall is generally pretty weak, because not only do you need to have each minion type, you also need very specific minions to really get the full benefit. You probably need to have at least 2 of the, cleavers or divine shield guys to really make it come together and work super nicely. And oftentimes players find themselves falling into a trap where they overinvest into minions that they're going to sell anyway because they're tempted by the early game hero powers. Next up we have Curator getting a little bit of a buff here. The Amalgam is getting buffed to a 1-2 up from a 1-1. So Curator hasn't been a very popular hero. It hasn't been considered one of the top heroes for a while now. There's a lot less early game buffs than there were before because of the way a lot of the new tribes work. Like pirates and elementals don't really have focus on just playing and using battle cries to buff things. They're usually more focused around constantly buying pirates and elementals and doing other things with it, so it doesn't synergize with the Amalgam as well as some of the other tribes that focused more on just, you play the battle cry, it buffs the thing. So, as the game has been diversifying in the different ways that you buff minions and the different ways that you build engines and boards, Amalgam has slowly been falling off. I don't think this change is enough to bring him back. It will help the Curator, though, in the early game have a little bit more life, right? The 1-2 Amalgam is going to be just that much more amount of starting stats to help you win your early fights. But I still don't think it's going to be enough to keep up with a lot of the other power early game heroes. But hopefully we see a little bit more Amalgams. I miss the Amalgam a little bit. I never thought I'd say that after how Amalgams were in original Battlegrounds, but I kind of miss them, man. Next up is Tusk, which, if you remember Tusk before when it first came out, it was the most dominant hero in all of Battlegrounds, except for maybe Eudora gave it a little bit of a run for its money. But its hero power was like how they're changing it to, pretty much. They're making it back to the greatness that it was before. The super ability to get triples on demand. But now it's going to cost 1 mana. It used to, or 1 gold. I'm sorry, we're gold here in Battlegrounds. Mana's for Hearthstone Standard and Duels. It's going to cost 1 gold. It is going to be a lot more powerful than it currently is, because currently it's kind of a bummer. You're very unlikely to get what you want. But costing 1 gold in the early game is still going to make it a little bit difficult to use to get triples, but it's probably going to put it up there in the tier level. I think it's going to bring it up to close to one of the better heroes in the game, just because getting triples is so important in the current landscape. Being able to triple into your Genie is huge. Being able to triple into any 5-drop carry is super important. So any of the heroes that excel at that tend to be pretty strong in the metagame. So I think Tusk is going to fall into that category. Next up, we have the Rat King. So the Rat King gives +1/+2 for buying the specific minion type that is indicated by his hero power. Now it's going to give +2/+2. So a little bit more stats to be able to get the things. It's still going to be just as high rolly as before, and as they keep adding tribes and stuff, it gets more and more difficult to land the buffs. I don't think this is going to really fix the whole Rat King problem. Now if you're high rolling with Rat King, you got a little bit more attack. But yeah, probably just don't pick Rat King. Unless you're feeling lucky. Alright, next up we have Rakanishu. Its hero power was to give friendly minion stats equal to your tavern tier, and it was at random, which always seemed really weird to me, because it made it so difficult to use in the later stages of the game, and it was like, even if this wasn't random, it wouldn't be as good as some of the other hero powers. So they're making it a targeted hero power now, so it's not random, which I feel like this should have just been done since the beginning. But I'm glad that they're getting around to implementing it here. Next up, we have George the Fallen. This is a hero that has definitely fallen out of the metagame. But yeah, its hero power was way overcosted. It costed 3. It was a super powerful effect in the later stages of the game. The problem is you just die. There's too many good early game heroes that would run you down before you're able to really make use of this. Now the hero power only costs 2, so you can wiggle it in places. When a hero power costs 3, you have to give up upgrading one of your units to use it, so it's so crazy expensive. Now when it costs 2, you can do it on those awkward turns, like when you only have 8 gold, you can buy 2 things in hero power or something. So you actually have a lot more justification to be able to be using it as you're building your board up, instead of just only in the late game. Because it's not at the opportunity cost of a unit anymore, it's at the opportunity cost of those 2 extra rolls that you would have to lead into a freeze with anyway, so those have a lot less value than 3 gold put together. It's kind of weird, but like 1 gold, 2 gold, and 3 gold are not a linear progression in value. The value of 3 gold is like a huge spike compared to the value of 2 gold. So I actually think this change will make a significant impact. I don't know if it's going to be enough to make the George playable at high levels, because you will still probably just die. But it's definitely going to make it seem like you got more of a chance. Seem like you can actually do something with it before then, at least. Next up, we have Yasura, which had the Dream Portal passive that added a bunch of dragons to your tavern tier at the end of every single round and allowed you to kind of go for triples on red whelps and things like that, were usually pretty common tactics. Now it's going to happen just whenever the tavern is refreshed instead of just at the start of your turn, which is going to be crazy. I think it's going to allow you to have this effect happening more than once per turn, which is going to allow you to more easily get triples, which is going to allow you to more easily discover your Razor Gores, your Calagos, your Genie, all of that good stuff. So I think Yasura might be a very strong hero going forward. Next up, we have the great Asmazarak. Next up, we have the great Asmazarak. So he was the guy that discovers the secret, and you'd try and find ice blocks so that you could kind of cheese out and live an extra round going in to the top 4 there. So I've honestly thought this hero wasn't too bad. Effigy has been removed from the secret pool, which was one of the worst secrets, so your odds of getting that ice block or that splitting image are going up. So that's already a buff right there. Now they're also making the hero power cost 1. So you can wiggle this thing in very easily all the time. This hero is going to see a lot more play, which I absolutely love, because this is one of the cooler heroes in all of Battlegrounds. It's one of the ones that allows you to make unique boards that benefit off the secret. So adjust your board slightly to pander to whichever secret you happen to have discovered that turn. Things like that are all going to be coming into effect. Your opponents have to think about how to play around the secrets. There's going to be a lot more ice block moments, which are always fun. So I'm excited to see this guy seeing more play. Okay, next up we have Galakrond's Greed. So Galakrond hasn't really been seeing too much play. It's a pretty tier 4 hero. They added the text recently to his hero power. Maybe not recently, but a little while ago to his hero power. That now it freezes things, so you didn't have to freeze your entire roll as you tried to Galakrond Greed 1 minion up, because that used to be the strategy. You'd greed something up and you'd freeze the whole roll. And they thought, maybe it'll be good enough if we just make it so they don't have to freeze the whole roll. It wasn't. It was still terrible. Now they've made it cost 0 mana, but you have to return to constantly refreezing to make sure you can level up 1 minion. So I think it's going to be a lot stronger. 0 is a world of difference from 1. Not only can you just upgrade something and buy it immediately, you can also more easily continue upgrading something to get an early 5 or a 6 drop while, you know, keeping a safe board. So I really like this one as well, because this is one of the more interesting and flavorful Battlegrounds hero powers. I love seeing interesting and cool things being good. So it's been a while in Battlegrounds since we've had a lot of the interesting and cool ones that enable combos be good. Usually it's just been the more aggressive beat-em-up tempo style things being good. So I'm excited to see a bunch of people evolving into things and then adapting their playstyle around what they've evolved into early and trying to make it work. And then they have TES Greymane, which, as far as I can tell, they just simplified the wording here. I've been staring at this for 5 minutes, and I have not been able to figure out what the change is other than that. So if there is something that they've changed here other than just simplifying the wording, let me know in the comments, because I am confused. Next up, we have Elise Starseeker, which previously, the way Elise Starseeker worked is whenever you taverned up a tavern tier, you would get a map, and that map would cost 3, and it'd be able to discover a minion from the tavern tier that you just leveled to. Now that map is only going to cost 2, so it's going to be cheaper than buying a minion straight up, which is going to allow you to level easier, which is really good. So it's going to have more of an Omu style and an Omu kind of feel to the hero's leveling process. Now that you can get those extra mana discounts by leveling, you can break the standard leveling curve, which is great. I love heroes that are able to do that and able to play in a different kind of way. Lord Barov is next. Barov's been a hero that's performed really well for me. I don't know if I'm just lucky at the gambling or whatnot, but I always seem to be able to predict pretty well which hero is going to beat which hero. I think it's because a lot of the heroes in the current state have different power spike timings, so you can kind of get away with using Lord Barov in the current meta. But he's being made even a little bit better. Now, if you happen to guess wrong, you get your 1 gold refunded back. So you can just keep letting it ride and keep gambling, which I really like the idea of this, because then that makes you, when you're playing Lord Barov, you can actually get in the spirit of Lord Barov. The thing I hate the most when I play Lord Barov is you lose 1 wager at one point, and you're kind of in the hole, and you're like, all right, now I can't risk the 1 gold to gamble again. This makes it so whenever you lose that wager, you just get it back, you coin the wager again, and you just keep gambling. Which, if I'm playing Lord Barov, that's all I want to do is gamble, 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 man. So I love this change, and I think it's going to make Lord Barov feel a hell of a lot more flavorful. Battlegrounds minion updates. The big one, the big kahuna for most people, I'd say, is Elementals will no longer be a minion type in every match. So for a while, Elementals were new, and they've been in every single game, and if you're like me, you've been thinking, oh my god, I can't wait until we stop seeing Elementals in every single game every day. It's been too long, Blizzard, please stop, get rid of them. For at least a minute, I need a break from all these Elementals. So finally they're doing that, so we get to have a little bit more variety in the Battlegrounds games. I'm excited for that. Next up, the Wrathweaver change. Wrathweaver was a 1-1, and now it is a 1-3. So now you can more easily justify going all demons from the start because the minion is playable on its own without any buffs. So this is absolutely huge for minions. It significantly lowers the cost of investing into demons and allows players to kind of go for that tribe more easily out of the gate. So we're probably going to see a lot more demons in the future. Next up, we have the Yoho Ogre, which I already thought was not a good card, but they're lowering the stats. But they are also lowering the Tavern tier, so now it's maybe a little bit more interesting. I could see this on Tavern Tier 2 being good. On Tavern Tier 2, just your flat stats that you're getting from it are ridiculous compared to the other Tavern Tier 2 minions, especially if you're able to bump it up to 3 attack. That would be the biggest thing. So it'll be able to trade with the early game 3/3s a lot better. Yeah, in general, its style of effect of attacking immediately after it gets attacked, it works a lot better in the early game. It works a lot worse in the late game, because in the late game, it's just going to get one-shot by something big. So it coming down a little bit earlier maybe gives a chance for its mechanic to actually shine, which is one of my favorite things. I love seeing funky, cool mechanics getting their moment in the sun, and after this minion survives being attacked, attack immediately is a mechanic that hasn't really had its full embrace of the light yet. So hopefully this is the change that enables Yoho Ogre to do it. Next up, we have Iron Sensei, which hasn't been getting too much love lately. There's been a lot better scalers introduced in the game. Everything related to elemental scales better than Iron Sensei. So it's time for it to get a little buff. So I love this little nudge in the direction. Being a Tavern Tier 3, it is now on the same tier as Deflectobot, so you can get the two as a package and start scaling your mech composition instantly in sync. Next up, we have the change to Southsea Strongarm. It is being moved from Tavern Tier 4 down to Tavern Tier 3, and having a little bit of a stat adjustment. So being on Tavern Tier 3 instead of Tavern Tier 4 maybe allows you to get the pirate comp off the ground a little bit. I'm not exactly sure how it plays with the frequency, but I imagine Tavern Tier 3s are slightly more frequent than Tavern Tier 4s, so as you're cycling through with the Hogger, you should be able to get more of these, and just in general, higher average number of pirate buffs then. So that's going to be pretty exciting for people that do get the nice Hogger's dream, where you get to crazy roll and buy all the pirates and get huge buffs off this guy. But really, pirates struggled at getting to that point, not really having success once they're at that point. And although the frequency of it may help you get there a little bit, really the Hoggers is the main part of that equation that concerns me. You gotta get those guys, and that can be a bit tricky. But let's see, maybe this change to Snarl Captain keeps it going. Snarl Captain is getting a slight statistical buff, So now it incentivizes you building up that pirate board instead of having to do the hog or big pivot kind of thing. Now, all of a sudden, maybe pirates on curve are just kind of okay and playable. So that's a good change, I think. Pirates really needed some help out there. Next up, we have the Lightfang change, and Lightfang is being reverted back to how it was before. I think this has to be one of the most requested changes by the Hearthstone community. Everyone's like, why don't they bring Lightfang back to how it was? Because the game's changed now. And Blizzard listened, so you always love to see that. Next up, we have the Genie change. Genie being moved back to Tier 6. Blizzard has decided oopsie on that one, so that's pretty good. I think that's got to be one of the most complained about things by streamers. People have been upset about Genie being on 5, and I think they'll be delighted to see it back on 6. Lieutenant Gar is being changed. Its base attack is going to be only at 5 instead of at 8. So it's going to have a little bit harder time being able to trade with things the turn you get it. It's going to take a little bit more setup. You're going to need to find some attack buffs to invest in it. It can't just be an engine all by itself anymore as well. It's more like a Battle Master kind of stat line than how it was before. 8 was just one-shotting too many things, I think. Too many of your opponent's mid-sized minions in the board. It just made it so easy to just pick up Gar and just throw him in your comp without thinking about it too much. Next up, we have Little Rag. So Little Rag used to be a 6/6, now is going to be a 4/4. So a little bit harder to get the Little Rag started up. This is the trend with the elemental changes. They're trying to make it a little bit harder. Now you gotta be at Terran 6 to get the Genie. For the Gar, you're gonna need to get a little bit of attack buffs on him to make him be able to one-shot things. The Little Rag's only a 4/4 to start out with, so it's gonna be a little bit more costly to begin investing in that direction. It's just making pivoting to elementals a little bit harder, because I think pretty much everybody was pivoting to elementals at some point in their high elo games. Next up, we have Dread Admiral Eliza, which is now going to be giving 2 attack and 1 health instead of only 1 attack and 1 health on pirates when they attack. So twice as much attack as before is a big deal. It's going to allow your pirates to, overkill things better. More likely one-shot things, get a little bit cleaner trades. Not the most impactful change in the world, but it will help definitely when you're first discovering the Dread Admiral Eliza. A lot of these 6-drop changes feel like they're trying to make it so that you at least consider these cards when you're discovering your first 6-drop off your Tavern 5 triple. So I like the changes. I think pirates definitely need the help. I don't know if there's going to be enough help. There was a few pirate changes. The more seemed geared towards playing pirates on curve. But pirates still seem a little bit underwhelming after those changes. Lastly, we have the Amalgadon change, which they added more words to the card, yet I feel like it says the same thing, except clunkier. So anyway, thanks guys for watching the video. Thanks guys for joining me while we look over these patch notes. Pretty exciting stuff. I'm looking forward to playing more battlegrounds on this patch and more duels. The duels balance with the hero powers is super exciting, and they haven't even released all the other hero powers. I'm curious if they're going to release all the hero powers at once, or if they're going to have like a trickle-in effect. I hope they trickle it in, because I feel like there could be different metas evolving based on every single time they trickle in new hero powers. So I want a slow build, actually. I don't want them to release all of the content at once, so that we'll just only play with whatever happens to be the best out of those hero powers, because I feel like the community would figure that out really fast, and we'd end up ignoring 3 or 4 3 or 4 treasures and 1 or 2 hero powers from every single class. So I'd really like to see the content trickle out so that we can kind of discover it over time and interact with all of the content. But anyway, that's just my thoughts on the patch. If you have any of your own thoughts, feel free to share. If you liked the video, please feel free, if you want to, you don't have to, but if you want to, follow, subscribe, all of that good stuff, and hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. So, holy smokes, wow. With the Warblades, you have now turned Warblades from the device that saves you into the device that absolutely kills your opponent times a billion, which I really, really like. This means you get to adjust during the game how you want to play your demon hunter.